the more confident in one paper that someone was about a public policy issue, and the less knowledge they had, that was actually highly correlated with having anti-establishment perspectives and viewpoints. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Shrink Space. This is Rob.
And this is David.
And for those who've listened, or probably more specifically watched us for a couple months, you might notice there's something different about my space here. Dave, do you notice anything different?
Yeah, like always, it looks like you took a modest and controlled, thoughtful approach to decorating around you. I like the fact that you must have got a second mortgage on your house to pay for the biggest sign ever. It's half the screen, and then you put nothing else anywhere. Like you couldn't have put
Nope.
you have, and even more than that, you have a stand for you to put crap, and there's a picture that no one can see, and then that's it, and then this massive sign. So I think you've done a really good job. This is really, yeah.
That's great, doesn't it?
Really well done, Rob. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, I worked with a place that makes neon signs locally here in St. Louis, and the person did a great job kind of giving me a mock-up, giving me dimensions, and I was like, sure. Fast forward like 2 weeks, I get this box, and I'm like, oh no. I should have paid more attention because this sign is like 3 feet tall.
Yes.
And I could have used something about half the size, but here we are.
Yeah. For our listening audience, what Rob has behind him is a neon billboard of our logo, which is really, and then everything else, again, like he hasn't changed anything. The lighting hasn't changed. Still in his basement, just with a massive neon sign behind him.
That's right. That's right. So, it's a process. Unlike your very formal studio behind you, Dave.
Professional.
Very professional. It's sometimes I guess there are some people who need to make up for what they lack personally with kind of their background. So it makes a bit more sense for you.
Rob, I could hear that from you if I didn't notice when you were looking at your sign that you had a faded beard. I know. You went to this. You have a fade on your beard. The only adult.
No, that's true. I got my haircut today.
I think that beard fade cost as much as that sign you've got behind you.
Oh, Jesus. Anyway, Dave, it's election season. If you didn't know, I don't know if you've heard. It kind of just goes under the radar. Oftentimes here in the U.S., we don't really know what's going on.
No big deal,
right?
I'm certain the right person won.
That's right. So that's a good segue. So we are recording this a couple of days before the election. This episode will go live on Election Tuesday here in the United States. And so we don't know who is going to win. Again, we are both certain the right person will win. But I am going to... This was kind of inspiration for me. Election season was inspiration for me. And it was inspiration for me for kind of an odd reason. I didn't really expect it. But, in general, I tend to lean, slightly to the left of center politically. But as I've been paying a bit more attention to, the election and unfortunately having to, get through some of these ads, something somewhat surprising happened, which was as I listened to Trump and some of the more Republican talking points around immigration, they started to make a lot of sense.
Wait, what the conservative platform around immigration did?
Yeah. In other words, like we have a border, why don't we protect it? So I started to dive into that a little bit more and do some research on it. And yeah, I think it's really a place where the left does not have the high ground they think they do.
Wait, why? Hold on. Tell me more about this. Why not? What do you mean?
Well, again, there's a border. So if you have a border,
yes,
right? If we're going to
Yep.
have a country, if we're going to have sovereignty, it does make sense that there should be some process for someone else to go through, right? I mean,
Wait, but
because otherwise,
what makes you think that we're not protecting the border? We have border patrol.
well, but if you look, and when I look at all these stories that I see it online in particular, it's, I mean, all of these people coming through, there's hordes of people that tend to come through during election time, particularly, it seems like. I mean, you're in Colorado. I certainly have heard stories about, Latin American gangs and stuff coming up to smaller towns and stuff like that. And I
Yeah,
mean, it seems like a losing argument for the left, in my opinion. So it's
but
kind of started to sway and caused me to question some of my orientation there a little bit.
but if you think about, like, for example, in Colorado, I think there's a big debate around what's actually happening, and I don't know. I've not traveled to, I live in Denver. Aurora's close by, but I've not been to the apartment buildings that they're talking about. But there's a debate around whether or not the person that owns those apartments is actually exaggerating the story in an effort to get out of mistreating the people staying in that apartment. Right?
Oh,
It's the same person that owns the apartment owns multiple apartments, and conveniently they've all been overrun by gangs, and so he is not making any updates on the property. And so it's possible that he's exaggerating the problem in an effort to get out of not, avoiding any kind of upkeep on the apartment buildings.
okay. Well, I mean, that's just one example. But I mean, so then what would you say about, people who come up here and they work, right? But they don't pay taxes because they're not citizens. I mean, that's another thing that seems to be kind of crazy, that you're
Mm-hmm.
able to come up here, be paid a wage, and not have to pay the taxes that you and I have to pay because we have formal jobs.
And you
And
and
if
you're
you're going to
th-
come up here illegally, then you should have to pay all the taxes that you and I pay.
and you're thinking that the left is good with that. They want him to come up here without paying taxes.
Well, I mean, they're okay with it because they're allowing it to happen, right? I mean,
Right.
their platform would say, or what they're for would say that, well, yeah, these people need to come up, right? It's a bit more the bleeding heart side of things, and they're not really thinking through, at least from what I've seen, the implications of all that.
Yeah, I guess I'm. What's the policy you're referring to that says that the left wants people to come up here and not pay taxes? I'm not
Well, I
sure
don't
what
know
that is. That part of their platform?
you're asking a lot of questions to which I don't have the answer. I just what I see. It's just what I
Yeah,
see.
yeah. Well, you seem very
Um,
confident in what you seem very confident without not a tremendous amount of data.
so yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut there. It was weird for me to play this role, Dave. I feel like you're more of the heel in
I
these
want you.
types of
I
conversations.
really. I think I've never been happier in my life than. And I'm just hoping that you did that long enough for people to send hate messages to you,
To
and
me,
then
yeah.
not watch the rest of the video. That would make
So
that would go full circle for me.
right. So we will learn from our previous mistakes and actually just pause here for a second and say the topic we'd like to talk about today, because it's election season and because both Dave and I are pretty interested, particularly me, but I think you too, Dave, around like what causes people to vote the way that
Mm-hmm.
they do here in the US, but probably has implications even outside of us. And something that you actually introduced me to, a concept a couple of years ago called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And
Yes.
so I'll talk about that in a second. But what we were trying to do here is a bit of a scenario where I have a stronger opinion about something, but don't have, and I'm confident about it, but don't really have any actual facts or data to back it up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, and so we were just playing around here a little bit, but Dunning-Kruger. So I'll actually read a definition of what this is. So it's again, a cognitive bias in which the least skilled or knowledgeable people overestimate their abilities or knowledge more than others. So I've seen, and you chime in here too, but I
Mm-hmm.
think I've seen it visually displayed in a way easier to observe or to understand. So there's a graph that I've seen. that plots confidence and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And what essentially this effect would say is the most confident people at first have usually a very surface level understanding of a concept, but that does not prevent them from being very confident about something. And then as they start to just dig slightly under the surface, they realize, oh, this is maybe a topic that is a lot more expansive or broad than I thought it was. So then
Mm-hmm.
their confidence about their knowledge and ability actually starts to decrease.
Yep.
And then assuming it's something that interests them, they continue to learn more. And then over time, their confidence increases again as they
Mm-hmm.
learn more. So it's
Mm-hmm.
essentially kind of a U-shaped curve here with confidence.
Yes.
Is that how you describe it, or what would you add there?
Yeah. I mean, I think the way I think about it is that nuance, if you don't understand a topic, then you're missing all of the nuance, and the nuance is what makes things difficult to understand. And so when you think about something like immigration, there's a lot of nuance
Yes.
there. And if you are just, scrolling TikTok and you hear somebody say, Kamala's not going to build a wall, and you go, oh my God, X, Y, or Z is happening, or vice versa. Trump is building a wall, and oh my God, this is what this means, right? We're not capturing the nuance. And without the nuance, things feel very simple. So you actually, you have this major degree of competence, but you have no real expertise. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. I like the word you use, simplicity, right? Is when you don't know much about a topic, it can appear a lot simpler than it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you can say you should build a wall or you shouldn't build a wall, but that you're making a lot of assumptions that a wall will do something or not to affect immigration. When I would imagine, me included, I am not at all versed enough to have an actual stance or feeling about building a wall.
Yeah.
How would
Yeah.
I know if that's going to work or not? There are people who spend their entire lives researching this and being a part of this that know. I
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. But I think it takes a unique person to recognize when they don't know something.
Yeah.
Like it's, and I'll say it this way: like if we're talking about um, how to engineer something, like if we're talking about math, I think people quickly go, "Whoa, I'm not good at that. I'm going to default to somebody else who knows more."
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, when it comes to issues related to politics, we all think we know. We're like very quick to build confidence despite not knowing much about the thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's weird. Like there's pockets where we're like very confident despite knowing nothing.
I agree. I think what also came to mind for me as I was preparing for this conversation is the work that you and I do right
Mm-hmm.
around psychology and human behavior,
Mm-hmm.
because we're all humans and we all observe behavior. I have found that a lot of people will overestimate their ability to read someone else. I don't know if you hear that a lot of here. Well, I'm a good read of people, and I know why someone's doing that. And only if we get the opportunity to challenge them more, do they maybe understand the nuance and what they don't actually know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think in our field, I see that a lot.
I mean, it's so funny you said, because when you said that, I was thinking, I'm aware of maybe 2 clients that I have had as an executive coach who said, I got a problem. I can't read people. Everybody else says, oh, I have the best intuition. It's
Right.
really fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's another example where, because you don't know the expanse of human behavior, of how things work, that it can appear a lot simpler than it is.
Yeah.
Stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, and psychology. Yeah. And everybody thinks that their intuition is fantastic.
Right. They're an amateur psychologist. And again, it makes sense because we all understand ourselves, or not all.
Mm-hmm.
We understand ourselves and why we do what we do, and we think that maybe is generalizable to other people, when sometimes it is, and oftentimes it's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Have you had the experience where somebody says that and you try to take psychology out of it, but have you had the experience where somebody is, acting like they're an expert on a topic that you are an expert on, and you had to How do you get someone to recognize that they don't capture the nuance? I think it's difficult.
Yes, I think it is, and I guess it depends on the situation that I find myself in. So if I'm at work and I'm working with a client, right? People are, they work with us to help them develop oftentimes, so I can point it out. But something, and I don't want to get too far because we're going to get to this part too. Like, what do you do about this? So I'll hold off a little bit, but I would say in our little acting scenario there, what you did is a good example of what to do, which is ask a question. Right? You don't need to tell someone that they don't know what's going on because that's not going to end well. But if you start, all right, well, tell me more about the border policy. So is that what you think the border policy actually is? And then if you have to have someone actually talk elegantly, conceptually, objectively about something, and they can't, that seems to be the first thing you could do.
Yeah. That's probably a healthier response. I used to just, loathe them without saying anything and then, talk shit later. That's usually my strategy. It's probably not the best strategy.
Well, I mean,
you could do both you could do both.
Well, I was gonna say there's room for both. There's room for both. I, as a side note, I was telling my wife that I was preparing for this type of, for this episode. And that was that we're going to talk about Dunning-Kruger. And I joke with her often because she'll say stuff and I'm like, I don't think you told me that. I don't think that's true, but you're pretty confident about it. So I joke with her that her biography will read, Jen Patterson, often wrong, never in doubt. So I think she was a good inspiration for me for this episode as well. She's going to hear this and be pretty unhappy that I mentioned that. But.
Yeah, let's talk about risk reward, Rob. So I like the fact that you go, I like the fact that you're willing to take a bullet at home to make that comment. And he prepared for it too. He thought, this is what I want to say. I'm going to tell my wife in advance. This is very good. Well done.
Yeah. Well, I want to give her a shout out, right?
Yeah.
But she's inspirational in many ways, and this is only one example.
That's right. How else will she know how much she means to you if you don't share?
Moving on. No, yeah, this will be a fun conversation next week. So
we should link her website below.
I mean, but I do it too. I would say, as someone who's been interested in psychology, I found myself, especially in like college and grad school, thinking, oh, I'm pretty good at all of this. I know what's going on here when I didn't.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned here before, my ego is normally pretty strong. And so in general, this is something I have to try to manage in my life, is not to assume that I know enough to be dangerous.
Yep.
When especially it's probably just more dangerous than enough.
Right. Especially when I think we work in a world where so much of it, I mean, it's a soft science. We'd like it to be a hard science, but the reality is that much of what we do is, this is like intuition. This is unconscious pattern recognition that we're leveraging. And there's a lot of times where I feel like I intuitively know what the right answer is, intuitively know what the dynamic is. And I feel that way most often when I really have very little information.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a real problem. But
But you
but
persist.
That's right. That's what I said. I was trying to think but I never give up. I really just dive in hard.
I mean, but we can make fun of each other and of other people we know. But I mean, part of the reason we're able to come up with these examples is this is a pretty human bias to have.
Yes.
While there are some critiques of this effect, I think one I saw most that made the most sense to me is it's not that the kind of less intelligent you are, the less knowledgeable you are, the more confident you are. It's just most people think they are better than average, which also I think makes sense. And think that's another bias, is kind of the better than average bias is, well, I mean, I don't know everything, but I know more than the general public does, or this, whatever group I'm comparing myself against does. When oftentimes that's not true either.
Right. Right. And that is, and I was thinking you tell me if I have it wrong here, but it is adaptive to perceive the world that way. Right. If you move through the world and you think that for the most part you make good decisions, and for the most part you are whatever, you operate in alignment with
Yep.
sound ethics or whatever, then you can function with confidence. But if you really knew how little you know about
Yeah.
everything, you'd be paralyzed by anxiety, right?
Yeah.
You would not be able to do anything, right? And so being able to be a little bit egocentric, a little bit arrogant, a little bit overconfident, I think allows people to, you know, have interface effectively in life.
I agree. And I think that's the upside of these types of biases, right? Is you can't just have this analysis paralysis of, well, I don't know what I don't know. And I need to go through life being completely curious all the time, acknowledging that I don't know, because then you won't get anything done.
Yeah.
So that's the upside of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the downside, of course, is the overconfidence and not actually understanding the depths and the range of actual information when you're talking about a topic. And I think, kind of pulling it full circle back to why we're talking about this today on election day is because I think this also informs how people make choices and affiliate with different political parties and political persuasions. Is, we can't know everything about our governments and the policies of governments and things like that. I mean, it's almost, and again, if we tried to understand that, we would never make a decision. I think that's the upside of political parties, right? It's a shortcut. Political parties are a shortcut, saying, well, I don't know. But in general, the R or the D in the United States, at least, I mostly agree with them. So I'll go ahead and vote for that person. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it also, this is maybe more of the same, but I was just, as you're talking, I was thinking about like during COVID, I used to live next to a cardiologist, and when COVID, there was first the outbreak. And I remember, everybody's got masks on and we're creating a lot of distance. And I remember being anxious about COVID. I didn't want to get COVID. And I, everybody, and so I remember wanting to believe that I understood that it was really not that big of a deal. And so he would come in from work at a hospital, and he would have to go to the back to take his clothes off and then go shower. He didn't want to get his family sick. And he would walk like under our window. And I would always say, not that big of a deal, right? It's just, and he was always like, no, man, it's a nightmare. People are in the hallway dying. And he would always say there's it's so much more complicated. The way that it is impacting our hospital it's overwhelming. And I was like in my kitchen hoping that I could oversimplify it as being not a big deal. And then someone that was in there that was intubating people was like, it's a real, so I think that happens in other places also, but like in politics, if I allow myself to recognize how little I understand about foreign policy, for example, I would be overwhelmed by fear around what's the relationship with China, what's the relationship with Russia, how is the UN interacting with, right? I would get anxious. And so it's better to say, the UN doesn't do enough and Russia's in, whatever. Trump's got Russia under control, and so respects Trump, so no big worry, and whatever. Kamala's going to do an apology, so no big deal there. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I think it serves us to oversimplify.
Yep. Again, I 100% agree with you. It serves us in some ways and doesn't serve us in others. And so one of the things I wanted to do is just look and see, well, is there any, what have people researched about Dunning-Kruger effect, about just overconfidence in public policy debates and things like that, to see, what, if anything, is there. And it turns out there's a couple of studies that talk about this. In one, and I'm going to look at my notes here for a sec, what they find is that perceiving yourself as informed does not necessarily, of course, correlate to being informed. And so I probably would have used, before thinking about this, the terms misinformed and uninformed in a similar way.
Mhm.
Like someone is misinformed or uninformed about something. But in fact, of course, they are two separate words. If I'm uninformed about something, I truly don't know anything about it. If
Yep.
I'm misinformed, I may still truly know nothing about it, but I think
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And
It
that
is
plays out in
yeah.
politics a lot.
It is wild to me that there's not a correlation between how much you know and how much you think you know. I understand what
Yep.
Dunning-Kruger is, but I would still imagine that there would be some kind of like that there's some maybe a light correlation, but you're saying there's not a correlation at all.
According to a couple of research papers that I found, there is not a consistent correlation between someone's perceived ability or understanding and their actual ability.
That is
Um,
amazing.
right. I also found a couple studies that come out of Europe that talk a little bit about this. Um, and they look at social media. So again, as I oftentimes do, I'll get on my soapbox here. Of course, what exacerbates this effect and this overconfidence? Social media. How? Well, you think about like a TikTok, right? Is a lot of people now will absorb information, quote unquote, through 30 to 90-second little clips. And then that reinforces or not their worldview. I know I've even seen a couple of these. What? Why are you
I'm just
laughing?
I'm just thinking about I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about somebody having a bowel movement and thinking during that time that they know how to create peace in the Middle East just during their bowel movement. Got it all figured out. That's all it took.
Bowel
Yeah.
movement. Uh, but I've even seen those videos too. That it's like a gotcha video where you have someone of one political persuasion or another trying to interview someone, and I've seen this on both sides. They'll be outside of a Trump rally or a Harris rally, and then they'll say, "Oh, well, you think this? Well, tell me more about it." And they put a microphone in front of the rally goer's mouth and say, "Well, tell me about it." Well, I don't know.
Mhm.
So they're exemplifying the Dunning-Kruger effect to
Yep.
some extent.
Yep.
But also then those videos just reinforce for a lot of people who listen to them and who watch them. Oh, well, see, obviously this person doesn't know what they're talking about. That doesn't mean I do. It doesn't mean
Right.
that I know anything about the border policy or anything. It makes me feel better because these people look stupid.
Yes.
I know nothing
Mhm.
different. And a couple research articles that I found would say the same thing, that this overconfidence about knowledge of public policy from citizens is a lot more likely to occur when people engage more with social media and less with traditional media.
So that's because the traditional media is longer form, and so
Yep.
there's more of a expansive discussion.
Yeah, it's less clickbaity.
Uh huh.
So if
Yeah,
I'm going to
makes
read,
sense.
15 years ago, there wasn't just a 30-second video that cut a very specific part of something out. I would read a whole, newspaper article, or I would listen to a debate between two people. Those debates still exist. Those newspaper articles still exist, but an increasing number of people are not actually reading or listening to those. It's like the debate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people didn't watch the full debate, but they watched, 1 to 3 minute clips of it and got
Mm-hmm.
a snapshot, and that probably just reinforced what they already wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes
Yeah.
them either, again, it reinforces for them, or it makes them a bit more confident of their understanding of an issue when they probably don't have it.
Yeah. And I would imagine that traditional sources of media are more likely to be held accountable for incompletely describing an issue.
Yeah.
Not that they always do a great job. I mean, I think you
Right.
could critique both sides for not,
Oh, yeah.
for being biased, but I can post 100 1-minute TikTok videos and be exceptionally biased in what I
Yeah.
share.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to be held accountable for that at all.
Yep.
If CNN does it, they get a reputation and that damages their brand. And so I wonder
Yep.
if they can be relied upon to be a little bit more thorough in their discussion.
Oh, definitely. Definitely for more traditional institutions like that. But then for those that are less traditional or newer, or for whom, their reputation is less of an issue, this can help them get famous. This can help them
Mm-hmm.
make money.
Mm-hmm.
I think of like Ben Shapiro when he does those I've seen a couple of those clips where he just goes, he's in a room and like people are surrounding him and they race to a chair to like argue with
Yes.
him.
Yes. Yep.
He's not actually looking to have a conversation with anyone. And the people around him, to his defense, aren't probably looking
Right.
to engage in a conversation either. They're just looking to point fingers and yell and scream. And he's looking to get a lot of views so he can make a lot of money.
Yes. Yes. And can I just tell you for the record, I know you're right about both those things. I think it's a genius idea. And I don't know how to do that for psychology, but if I could figure it out, I would do that. It's such a provocative, there's so many things going on. It's just well done. I know I'm derailing, but I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I guess from what perspective is it well done? It's well done because it's engaging. People want to look at it. It's well done because he makes money from it.
Yeah, it's the gamification of a debate.
Right.
So instead of us actually learning about the topic, what he's done is he has pit whatever this is, 20 people against each other for who's going to get in that chair. And then they're rating each other on whether or not that little nugget of an argument is good or not. There's
I didn't even know that last part.
Yeah.
So
when they're debating Ben, if the audience thinks that the comments when they think that this person needs to be removed from the chair because their arguments are not good, they raise their flag and they're bumped. And so what happens is, it's like, to your point, there's zero effort to comprehensively understand whatever the topic is at hand, but it's just about how do I oversimplify or just make my discussion so full of facts that I get to stay in this chair for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's just dumbing everybody down,
And I think that's what I get probably a bit heated about is it's great for him. Mm-hmm. It's great for other people who are like him, who want to gain notoriety, who want to be provocative in doing so. That's how they gain notoriety, to make money. But there's a lot of downside, I would say, to kind of a public understanding of these different policy issues, to an understanding of there's a lot more that connects us than divides us, because that's usually less provocative and less interesting. Mm-hmm. So when I see things like that, I struggle with it a lot.
Yeah.
I can't with that. That's probably the reason I didn't even know
the
whole setup there. I watched 30 seconds of it. I'm like, I can't. I hate this.
Yeah.
One of the other things I found interesting too is the more confident, and this was another research article, the more confident in one paper that someone was about a public policy issue, and the less knowledge they had, that was actually highly correlated with having anti-establishment perspectives and viewpoints. Does that make sense?
So if you are anti-establishment, you think you know more about public policy?
Yes. That your confidence is even higher about your knowledge and understanding, your knowledge of something than it is. It's more, so there's a high correlation between those two things. Now, this again was a European study, but at least on the surface, it makes a ton of sense here. As well. Mm-hmm. And as to why we're seeing some of what we're seeing with political parties and partisans on both sides.
Yeah. And the politicians know it, and they lean into it, and they harness it to get what they want, to get the votes.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about, just trust in institutions and things like that. We're going to do an episode on that at some point, but this is just another data point to add to that is, this is happening in all spheres, including in politics. Mm-hmm.
As you're talking, I was kind of reflecting on that Ben Shapiro game. And I think it's also interesting to think about, just as you have, or we all have, the effect of the Dunning-Kruger effect influencing kind of how we appraise things. It's also true that it's at play when we appraise people. So if you are on the right, or if you're on the left, your understanding of people on the other side is going to be influenced by this as well. You're going to think that this group is whatever, hyper woke, and they are just driven by their emotions. And you're going to be on the other side, you're going to think that this is just a money hungry, ignorant people, right? Both those things, there's a lot more nuance to why somebody votes for Harris or for why somebody votes for Trump. But you're going to want to categorize those people and minimize them if they, voted different than you.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think a lot of what we're talking about, we started with Dunning-Kruger, and there are a lot of different biases here that exist, and we're probably talking about 4 or 5 and not even actually naming them here. But yeah, to your point, that's the same thing. Is my confidence about my ability to peg someone a certain way because
Mm-hmm.
of this pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Judge people
Yep.
pretty quickly.
Yep. Yep.
And again, that's what a cognitive bias is, right? It's just a mental shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Mm-hmm.
downside, of course, is that it affects the effectiveness or veracity of the decisions that you make.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, again, has a lot of downside to our politics. So you asked me earlier, how do you address this? What do you do?
Yeah.
And I said
Yeah.
the first is, well, if you're talking with someone else, I think asking the question, engaging them in a conversation, and having them need to explain themselves makes the most sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
What else makes sense to you?
If you're
How
dealing
do
with
you
somebody
combat
else,
it with someone else? Yeah.
yeah, I think the right answer is yes. Probably ask questions. Um, I don't know. I mean, what I'm aware of is when I feel like that's happening, it's hard for me. Like I'm trying to think of. I'll give an example that's
Yeah.
happened like with me with my family. Um, you know, we've done. You and I have both been in school for a long time for
Yep.
psychology. Like I would say that
Yep.
you and I probably have an above average understanding of psychology.
I hope
And
so.
I've had family members that are taking intro to psych classes and then come back and they want to teach me about the structures of the brain. And it's really hard for me to be, and I have to be like, it's a hard exercise for me to not say, are you kidding? Do you know how many
Right.
years I've learned about this particular organ? Like
Right.
I've heard of this before, but you have to sort of go like, okay, it's worth me listening to this person and explore. It's not, I don't need to get combative all the time.
Right.
So I guess that's the first thing is like to not always have the need to demonstrate your expertise so that you're
Yep.
able to then ask questions, right? It's easy in the beginning of this discussion that we had. I knew what you were going to do and I knew what my role
Right.
would be. And
Right.
so it's easy to ask those questions. But if I were passionate about it, I would just want to be like, you're an idiot. And here's why, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So you have to be able to step down and ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that's the solution for when you're talking to someone else. But then you're also starting there in your answer to think through, well, how do you manage this for yourself? Because again, we all do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think especially in politics it's easy because we look to politicians to solve, societal issues that
Mm-hmm.
we all experience in our countries. And so it makes sense that we're not, we're looking to them for very specific right or wrong, policy positions and issues. And so it can be easier, I would say, in politics to be pretty confident that this person is the person that can do this, or this party is the party that can do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think individually, another thing we can do individually is just, remember we're not always right, to be
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah.
But that's difficult, especially in a political environment.
Mm-hmm.
How many politicians do you know that would say, "Oh yeah, actually, I was wrong"?
I know.
And what's the
Zero.
incentive? What's the incentive to do that as a
Yeah.
politician? I mean, we can blame them all we want, but I think there's some culpability for us as well in that there's no incentive for people to say, "Oh, I messed up."
Yeah.
Did you see? I watched this a couple of weeks ago, just talking about, hey, this is the debate now, and watching Harris and Trump debate this year, and then I saw debates in like years past, and in 2000 it was Gore and Bush, and they were on, I forget which show they were on, but there's a clip of Gore saying, actually, you know what, I was wrong about this thing. You're right, George, I was wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember thinking, never
No, I know.
never would that happen right now. There's no way. But it's not just their
Yeah.
fault. They'd be crucified, both of them,
Yeah.
if they said, "Oh, actually, you know what? I've come to understand this differently." I mean, even Obama did that. I think it was with like gay marriage, although I believe that he always was for it. He had at least when it was coming out, he had been like, you know, my understanding and my beliefs here have changed over time, and now
Right.
I'm a lot more for this than I used to be. Even saying something like that would be
Yeah.
very difficult now.
So I have a question. Walk me through this, Rob. If we think about defining the Dunning-Kruger effect, or how it's like, how it shows up practically, is it all tied to beliefs? Meaning beliefs that, I guess I should say, beliefs that allow us to then vilify the opposition. Like if you ask me, David, can you fix a car? Or
Oh, right.
David, can you, whatever, do you know how to garden? Or can you fix a house? Or can you, anything tangible? I don't think I'd be as likely to believe that I'm an expert without information. But if you asked me if I could weigh in on what's the right way for us to handle the homeless population, I got lots of ideas, real
Right.
confidence, right? And my perspective is that people that disagree with me around homelessness or around immigration or around whatever, foreign policy, it's because they're stupid or bad. And so, like, does the Dunning-Kruger effect only, is it really just an avenue that allows us to pit ourselves against others, like be in group, out group?
I believe, if I remember correctly, where this started was not at all in the political or social science realm. I think the original study, and you may chime in here too, but I feel like the original study was a test of college students and it gave them, I can't remember if it was math problem, some sort of problem with an actual right answer.
Oh,
And
and
it
it
said,
still
hey,
existed.
can you solve this? Try to solve it. And how confident are you in your ability to solve it? And what they found through this initial study was that the people who performed poorly were still very confident in their ability to be successful in solving the problem.
Interesting.
So I would say, yes, it's both, but in politics, it's different because there isn't just one right answer. So how do you solve the homeless issues?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There are 25 different things you can do, and
Mm-hmm.
not each of them are going to work all the time with every different population, I would imagine.
Yeah. So
Whereas
yeah.
in a math problem, there's one right way to do it. There's one right answer.
Yeah, there's reality testing in math, but
Yeah.
there's not so
Yeah.
much reality testing in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Very
So,
interesting.
yeah. So I would say, again, that humility, asking questions to try to gain understanding. I mean, those are the things that we can do. But unfortunately, from a political sphere, that's not what we're going to see in our
Mm-hmm.
politicians. So it just kind of goes back to those individual things that we can do to reduce the likelihood that we succumb to this effect, to this bias.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Well, Dave, that's what I had for you.
I'm looking forward to, Rob, how are you going to shoehorn in people liking and subscribing this to our channel and this video with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah. Well, I described the Dunning-Kruger effect as a cognitive bias, and cognitive biases can affect the veracity or the truth of the decisions that we make.
Okay.
What I know about those who have subscribed to our show, they must not have that, because their decision making
Oh
and
my
thought processes and judgment,
God.
bar none, they're
Uh-huh.
great.
Perfect.
I'm
Yes.
more worried about those who haven't subscribed yet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. High
I worry
confidence,
about,
not a lot of
yeah,
expertise. Yeah.
exactly.
I get it.
I think one solution that we didn't talk about to reduce the likelihood of succumbing to this is subscribing to this show.
There should be a journal article written about that, because I think there's a strong correlation. All right, perfect.
But please like and subscribe, everyone. Dave, we're
Yep.
on a number of different social channels.
We
If you
are-
want to go over that.
We are social media pros now. Shrink Space Show everywhere you get social media. So Instagram, TikTok, and then our email is shrinkspaceshow@gmail.com.
So please send your suggestions, your feedback. Again, definitely enjoy hearing what you have to say positive about me, and critiques of Dave. Always welcome.
I do hope that you got blasted in the comments for your
I may have
intro.
gotten a bit blasted. Yeah, I'll see. I'll see what kind of text I get from my family members on Tuesday after they listen to this. So.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Bye, everyone.